one day I was leaving, and in their kitchen they had a wall that was open. There was this older woman sitting, and she's getting sun. And I looked at them. I said, who is that? What is that? And they go, oh, that's the gross muddy, meaning that was the grandma. And it was one of their people I lived with, their mother. And I said, what is she living in the wall? And then they explained to me that when the Nazis came in World War II, next door was the Gestapo headquarters or whatever. But one of the families was Jewish. And the people in the building, the four of them, they carved out the wall. And the other family lived there during the war, and they never turned them in, and they saved them from being taken by the Nazis.
Wow.
Yeah, it's crazy.
So this is going to be a great conversation today, like we have every other day. Today I'm able to sit with someone that is super dear to me, Judy Neiwirth. Probably pronounce it wrong because I do it all the time. But how this whole thing came about, I said, Judy, I wanted you to come to the podcast. She said, Beethoven, whatever you want. Life is easy, whatever. So welcome, Judy.
Thank you.
I want you to get closer to the mic. The mic's gonna be your friend today.
Okay, I need friends.
So Judy is in the money management business. She's gonna give all the clarity of what that is, what that looked like. And I want to start from the beginning, Judy, to have the conversation about how did this whole thing come about, where you from, who you are, and what you're doing today. That's a lot, huh?
It is.
But you're ready.
I'm always ready.
You're always ready. So Judy, growing up in New York, the Northeast, right?
I was born in New York, and I lived in Long Island till I was 6. And then my father was an industrial engineer, and he built a factory in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. So my Wonder Bread years, 6 to 12, I lived in Milwaukee. And we moved there when it was 20 below zero in January. And my mother looked at my dad and said, really? And they loved it. And we would have stayed there, but they actually had promised my dad a $2,000 bonus in 1968, and they didn't give it to him. So he came home and he said to my mom, I quit. And she said, okay, dear, but let's move back to New York so when you have a fight, you can walk across the street and quit jobs, and I don't have to keep moving cross country. So
that's a little different.
So we moved back to New York, and we moved to New Rochelle, which is north of New York, not in Long Island, because my mother didn't want to move back to Long Island because they had put in sidewalks, and it was too citified. So we moved to New Rochelle. Okay.
Wow.
And that's where I lived until I went to college.
Did you grew up? You had a brother.
I have an older brother.
How was the experience of growing in New York back then? Before you didn't get a full experience of New York City.
No, we lived outside, the city, and my parents would take us in. I mean, we'd go to a Broadway show every month. My dad would take us to a Ranger game, a football game, or whatever. My mother would take you to the symphony, the opera. We went to everything.
Did you enjoy? Well, when you moved to Wisconsin, how was that experience?
It was fun. I was a little kid, and next door my neighbors had a pond, so you could go ice skating all day long at nighttime. So we used to zip around.
Life wasn't that bad, huh?
Yeah, it was beautiful. It's a nice place to live.
And the move back to New York, was it something that you said your mom didn't want to move back into New York City?
No, not back to Long Island.
Back to Long Island.
So we just went north. That's all. And we all had family. I still had family there.
Was your family in New York still, or
I still have family in New York. I mean, my cousins. I had aunt and uncles. I mean, my mother had a big family. So did my dad.
So growing up in New York, what did your parents do? Your mom?
My mom never worked, and my father was an industrial engineer and accountant. He had been a very poor kid. He grew up in the Lower East Side. And I remember my parents were talking about the Depression, and my mother's parents were comfortable. And he said to my mother, he said, if I didn't steal an apple before, during, and after the Depression on the way to school, he says, I didn't eat lunch. He said, so the Depression was like a non-event in my family.
Wow.
And my mother was, she was always comfortable.
So
So
so your mom was more comfortable, grew up in a different
Yeah,
environment than your father did.
but he was very smart and he did very well. And when he went to school, they had half years. So by the time he was 13, everybody was going to college. And his sister was 10 years older. So he went to St. John's and got his accounting degree, and he went to Columbia and got his engineering degree. And then afterwards, she actually had money, and he got his MBA from Harvard and got out, I think, in 1937. Don't quote me, maybe 38. And then he joined the Army, and he was in the Army 8 years during World War II. And he was a colonel, and he had a Purple Heart and a Silver Star and a Bronze Star, and he had a paralyzed wrist from the war, so he couldn't pass the peacetime physical. And he met my mom on a blind date after the war. They got married, and they were married almost 30 years. My dad died about 2 weeks before their 30th anniversary. He had a heart attack. And my mom was young. She was 53, and he was only 58. And I was very close to my dad, and no one would tell me. I mean, like 12 or 14 hours went by because no one wanted to be the person to tell me because they were out of the country. And finally, my mother's cousin, who I was staying with, told me.
Wow.
And what?
Yeah, please, no. Well, growing up in the household with a dad that was in finance, you believe that's where it all got started for you?
I think so. I think people talked about, I mean, I remember there was a big bankruptcy. I'm trying to remember. I want to say W.T. Grant. One of them went bankrupt. But the thing is, they had bills of lading, and people had to put them in. And he insisted that they all be signed. And back then, if they wanted to cheat you, they could put it on the Xerox machine, and it would all be black. And the real bills, so you had to sign everything in blue. But now I don't. Now you could get away with it. But there was stuff like that went on, and he was very good. And my brother actually became an actuary, which it's like a mathematician. They figure out what your if you go to do your insurance rates, or you say you used to have the teachers union for the state of California, and you'd have to figure out how many people are going to retire, how many people are going to die, how many people, and you'd have to figure out how much money you had to earn every year to pay everybody's stuff. And that's what actuaries do. And what had happened, he really was very smart, and he got like perfect scores on his boards. He graduated third in his class at like 1,200. No. But what happened, he actually wanted to be an astrophysics major. And he came home from college, and he told my parents that he was going to be an actuary. And I'm sitting at the table laughing, saying, so tell me if this is bad because you can't be a teacher and make like $12,000 a year, a full professor made back then in like 1973. I said, or you could be really rich and retire whenever you want to if you're an actuary. So, and what happened by then, I was in college, and I went to Simmons, which is a very good school. I was kicked. They kick me out and made me go to Simmons, basically. I'll tell you that. But what happened is that I had graduated high school early in January, and I was a teller at the bank in New Rochelle. And Iona College was there, and I started at Iona. And I'm a happy little camper. I'm going to work. I'm going to college. And my parents tell me, you have to leave. I said, what do you mean? They said, you have to leave. You cannot stay in New York. You have to go away to school, because they probably knew I'd still be living in my house in New Rochelle, the happiest little camper, and could not care. So what happened, I had actually had a very good friend. I had gone on a bicycle hostel through the Canadian Rockies when I was 16.
Wow.
And you rode like 70 miles a day. And back then, the trip was $400, and my bicycle was $200. My parents said to me they would pay for the trip if I paid for my bicycle. So I had a job in the grocery store. And you got to realize, it's so old, they didn't have barcodes on the stuff. You used to have to stamp everything. There were no barcodes.
Oh my goodness.
And I made $3 an hour. And that was the minimum wage, and I worked every day after school and on the weekends.
So we should be grateful for the minimum wage we have now.
And then, and it took me months to pay for my bicycles, like $200, because I had to pay taxes. And then I could only have the car if I took my dad to the train station. So I had to put the gas in the car, and, so I had like no money. And, so anyhow, what happened, my friend, after they told me I had to go find a school, I said to her, her cousin had football tickets and she was going to go for an interview at Simmons, and he went to, I think, Brandeis or Boston University or something. I said, I got to go with you. I got to go with you. I got to go to this school. My parents are driving me nuts. So I go to this interview, and back then they, you actually went in person to see things, and they said to me, I told them about my bicycle trip, and they said, well, if you apply, you'll definitely get in. I said, done. I was like, done.
So in order for you to go to college, to a certain college, but then you had an actual one-on-one interview.
Well, you could, yeah, and you stuff, but yeah, that was the easiest way. So I said, okay, done. So that's how I viewed going to college. Like, okay, they said I'll get in, fine. So I go to,
out of here.
So I'm out of here. And Simmons was like 3 blocks from the ballpark, and I'm a big ball fan. And so what happened, you had to take a liberal arts major with your major. So I looked at my baseball schedule, economics and finance ended on good days when I wasn't going to the baseball game. Or in real life, I could have been a nurse, because a big health science school. Had nursing been on those days, I might have been.
So the way that you got to the point where you are today is because of your baseball schedule.
Well, that helped me.
That helped out a lot.
All right. And then I'm at Simmons. And then what happened is my brother doing the whole thing. He wants the astrophysics stuff. And I come home and he's telling them all this. It was my first semester at Simmons. And I said to him, since we're talking about school, I think I should share with all of you that I am going to receive a D in inorganic chemistry this term. And then my brother jumps up out of the table and says, how can you live with such a grade? I said, it's not bad. It's not bad. I said, I told Dr. Bronner if she couldn't think outside the box and let me take a little fuzzy animal and throw him on a scale, there was no way I was ever going to figure out the molecular weight of a mole in this lifetime if I couldn't use a real mole. So I said, it worked out. My father's looking at me. How did this work out? My mother's trying not to laugh because she's like, it's used to me. And I said, I told her if she promised to pass me, I promise never to take it again. And you don't have to pay for it again.
Works out.
So, and I said to my brother, just because you graduate 3rd in your class, and in retrospect, after he went to college, he got his master's at University of Michigan. He was 3rd in his class for his end. Wow. So I said, I remember getting up, we had a table, and I got up and I'm kicking, and they were looking at me. I said, I want to explain to you, if they have to kick me out of Simmons, and I'm the dumbest person there, you never know. I said, the nice thing about college, they never tell you who the absolute dumbest person is. I said, and I'm not going to care. And they were just like, So anyhow, then what happened? By my end of my sophomore year, I'm thinking, oh, this place is driving me nuts. Everybody's really smart here, and they're like Gwen Eiffel. All these smart people were in my class. They wanted to take on the world. So then I said to them, I think I want to go to London School of Economics for 6 months.
But why would you want to go there?
Well, you could go abroad your junior year.
Okay.
So then they said to me, well, we're not sending you away for 6 months. I said, yeah, okay. So I don't say anything to them. Wait. So then I find a program in Vienna, Austria, where they had something called Institute for European Studies, and they have all the little schools like Simmons and Colby and Bowdoin, Santa Clara and Beloit and just Kenyon, all the little schools in the United States. So, and they had where you could go there. And the thing is, the courses were in English because the professors would come over from the University of Vienna and teach the course in English. Mm-hmm. But if you wanted to go take it in German, you could go there. It's like, I still speak 10 words of German my entire life. So even though I lived with a family, I can count to 20 maybe in German still. And so what happened is I come home, and it's like the beginning of June. Said, "Listen, I forgot to tell you, I'm leaving. I'm leaving September 5th. I'm going to Vienna this year for school." And they're just like, they're just like, really? And that's it. So off I went to Vienna, which was the best experience.
How long did you stay there for?
A year. I was there 1975, 76. And the world was communist, so we used to travel. And then the thing is, I didn't have a winter jacket, so my parents had given me like $50 to buy a winter jacket, because back then that's what it cost. So of course, whenever I had $50, I went traveling. So they,
Oh, gosh.
so I was wearing like, 4 layers of clothing and a couple of jackets. Don't ask. I look like a little homeless person.
And you
And
were just supposed to go buy a jacket.
well, no, it gets better. And I used to write to them, oh, I went on a trip, I didn't buy it. So they send me $50. And every time they send me $50, I'd go someplace else. So what happened is that February came and I get a telegram from them. We'll see you tomorrow. because you got to remember back then, they didn't have cell phones. And you couldn't make a phone. Yeah, you'd have to go to the post office. You had to have $5, which was a lot of money back then. And you'd get a 3-minute phone call, and it would echo under the Atlantic Ocean because it was a cable. And when you call somebody up, they were so happy to hear from you. You didn't get anything accomplished.
Yeah, those days. It's a little different now.
Yeah. So, and I mean, if you ran out of money or you didn't have stuff, like we used to have our main meal at school. And then anything we had, we all,
Figured it out.
Well, we lived with families, so usually everybody.
How was that experience living with families abroad?
Oh, it's not. Oh, yeah. I had these to show you how nice it was. I lived with a family. There were 4 like apartments. It was 4 floors, and they all like whatever on the floors. And one day I was leaving, and in their kitchen they had a wall that was open. There was this older woman sitting, and she's getting sun. And I looked at them. I said, who is that? What is that? And they go, oh, that's the gross muddy, meaning that was the grandma. And it was one of their people I lived with, their mother. And I said, what is she living in the wall? And then they explained to me that when the Nazis came in World War II, next door was the Gestapo headquarters or whatever. But one of the families was Jewish. And the people in the building, the 4 of them, they carved out the wall. And the other family lived there during the war, and they never turned them in, and they saved them from being taken by the Nazis.
Wow.
I mean, yeah, it's crazy when you saw Stutz. And then they had, they just had, because my parents' absolute best friends were people it's really bizarre, who were both in concentration camps. And what had happened is that they were Polish, and they were wealthy. I guess they were jewelers, and they had a 10-carat emerald or something. And what happened is that when the Nazis were coming, they had a neighbor, and their daughter was 4 years old, and they gave the emerald to the neighbor and said, will you raise our daughter? And they both I don't even know how they lived, but they all had the numbers, and they both lived, and they came back to get the daughter. And that's how they found out they were both still alive. And then the neighbor must be beyond a saint, whatever, because the neighbors gave them the emerald back and said, sell it and go to the States, and the daughter. So, and they came to the States, and they had another life, and they had another child, and,
So when you...
So what I want to say, which is kind of important, and one thing I learned from them is, and I see it now with, you see the people escaping from Syria and all these things, and even now you don't know. Their thing was, you should always have some assets you can put in your pocket and start over. That's why they always were big in having 1-carat diamonds, or people had stamps, because these are people that had everything wiped out. Their homes were just taken, their currencies were destroyed, and all their assets, were confiscated or taken. So these were people that are a big believer in having assets you can just... Tomorrow you got to get on a plane and you can trade them for the same thing around the world.
So the mindset of having assets that's valuable started from your family back then?
Yeah, you know what it was? My parents were very comfortable, but they were wonderful parents, but they were strict in the sense that when we wanted to do something, they'd always say, how are you going to pay for that? And I remember my mother had a little jar with about $30 in singles. And if you needed to borrow some money, you'd have to, like $2 or something, you'd have to put an IOU in and say, I owe you whatever. And then I don't know if my allowance back then was 25 cents, 50 cents, but you had to pay them back. You had to learn that if you couldn't, they'd pay for certain things, but if you wanted things they thought you should pay for, you had to pay for it. And they weren't credit card people. They were people like, how are you going to pay for that if it's not in your pocket? You can't have it yet.
So that financial upbringing, do you believe that's how you really got into the
No, I
think
think what happened is when my father died, I was out of school one year, and I was working for the oil analyst for McDonald and Company, and I'd do his reports and stuff. And then when he died, it was like, whoa, wait a second, I've got to figure it out. And my mom was really comfortable, but she was young. She was 53. I didn't know if she'd ever do anything again. But fortunately, she had, she remarried. My stepfather was an executive at Canada Dry. And his whole family, my stepbrother now, he's an adjunct professor at William Patterson University, plays a bazillion instruments, ran the Hackensack music department. My niece, his daughter, also plays a bazillion, teaches music in the school system there. So his whole family, and my stepsister was a social worker. So when we had dinner, when the families met, it was a hoot. And they ran around the room, and everybody would say, what do you play? What do you play? And everybody in his family, they played this. They played the piano. They played, you name it. They played whatever. If they could have been their own symphony. And then they look at me and they said, what do you play? I said, me, I play the radio.
Radio, absolutely.
I said,
makes it easier.
But after dinner, my mom said, what do you think? I said, well, you're marrying the do-gooders of the world. You brought the capitalists to the world, actuary and finance. I worked in a brokerage house back then.
So working in the banking industry
came later. What happened is after my dad died, my mother was, I told you 53, but she had remarried, and there was something about you got a once-in-a-lifetime exclusion if she waited till she was 55 to sell her house. And what happened, my grandmother was still alive, and she was in Florida, and my mother's sister had passed away. She had cancer, and she had been in Florida. So my mother said, I think we're going to move to Florida. Would you go? I said, well, let me see. So I come down here. It gets better. I come down here, and I don't have a job. And I said, and I have my resume, I worked at the banks, I worked at the brokerage houses. So my brother had a very good friend who's the guy had like a little janitorial business where he was starting, and he'd clean like office buildings. And his wife, so it was just him and his wife. So they said, you can come work with us. I said, okay. So I'd run around at night, and we'd, clean little office buildings. I tell you, telephones were easy. Carpeted was good. Toilets were a disaster. And every time I go now, I think, what the hell do these people's houses look like? So I did that, and I lied, and I got unemployment. And then wait, it gets better. So then the brother of the sister, the woman I was working with, the guy's wife, he worked at Guardian Pools in Fort Lauderdale. He said, Judy, I can get you a job at Guardian Pools. I said, yeah, okay, fine. So I lie. I don't tell them I went to college, and I apply for this job, and I get a job cleaning pools while I'm doing my other cleaning, and of course, illegally collecting unemployment insurance at the time. So then what happens, I go there, and I don't even know how to do a stick shift. I probably strip the gears every day of my life. And the thing is, and I would never hire anybody like me to clean your pool. I knew nothing. I used to just throw I used to throw the acid in and the chlorine and put put the little pieces of paper in and vacuum out the pool. It was ridiculous. But the thing is, I looked so affluent, that's all I could say, because I was in the sun all day. I was strong as an ox because I was working out with all this stuff that was too heavy for me. And so I would go for interviews, in the afternoon. And what happened, one of the, I was doing, pools at a really rich place, and I was talking to the woman, and she said to me, now tell me the truth. I know you went to college. So just tell me, where did you go and why are you cleaning my pool? And I told her, and she said, her husband was some sort of banker. She said, do me a favor, just give me your resume next time. And he put it through, and I got a job interview at a bank down here, and I got hired. And that's how I started my banking career.
So you started your banking career by cleaning pools?
Through the back door of cleaning. But you know what it was? See, that was the thing. There was never anything that was beneath me to do. That's the thing. People think, and these people, whenever they see you're doing well, they always think, oh, this. And yes, I had my parents were comfortable, but they were like, I mean, I didn't say to my mom, oh yeah, by the way, I'm cheating on unemployment and I'm cleaning pools. She would have like gone crazy. I mean, because when I got married, I owed like $2,000 in taxes and whatever was going on. And I said to my husband, I'm coming with dowry debt. And my mother must have been there. And she looked at me like,
How?
are you kidding me? How, this is someone who never owed anybody money ever. And she was looked at me and she was just like, how much is it? I want to know. We're going to write a check tonight and then you're going to pay me back. But she was so annoyed that they think that one of her children
So did you want to create another route? Like, is that you wanted to create something for yourself? Is that why you went you moved another route from what your parents, their lifestyle and what they were doing?
No, they just made more money than I did. You know what I meant? I mean, at the time, when I was a kid, my father, like, he wasn't really wealthy. I mean, as the years went by, he became more affluent. But I remember my mother used to have a Christmas club for each of us. Like, she put $3 a week in it so we could go to camp in the summer. So she would budget. Like, she was that way. And I was a very sick kid. I had terrible allergies and I could only eat stewed fruit, fresh vegetables and meat till I was 7. I was allergic to dairy. I was allergic to milk. And when we lived in Milwaukee, my parents used to have to drive to Chicago to buy margarine because they didn't sell it in Wisconsin because it was the dairy state. Wow. And they had a freezer just to put stuff in that I could eat.
So you're allergic to dairy and you guys moved to the dairy state.
Yeah.
That had to be an experience. And so working in the bank, how long you work in the bank?
I started in banking in 1982 and I was in banking from 1982 to 1997.
When did the shift? I mean, the shift happened, I'm assuming, in 1987. That's when you started your own firm?
Yes.
Or how did that process?
Well, what happened, I was in banking and then I had gone, what happened, I originally worked at Flagship, then Sun, and then I ran Manufacturers Hanover, which was a big New York bank, trust investment department down here for about 9 years. And they had moved the office from Miami to Boca, and I didn't want to commute at the time. My kid was like 3 years old. So what I did is I was offered a job to go back to Sun at the time, which was great because they gave me upfront money. And the day I gave my notice to Manufacturers Hanover, that night they were taken over by Chemical Bank. I would have been in the losing bank. So not only did my stock go up, I got a bonus to go back. It was the best. And so I was at the Sun for about 5 years, and I got my old accounts back because I used to manage money for Baptist Hospital, Children's Hospital, the Zoo, the Opera, and I was treasurer of Vizcaya, which is the museum, for 10 years. And after that, I went to work for a private family for a year. And then my partner and I, who I had known from the bank, we went to a dinner. I think it was Bank United, or one of the banks. They wanted to set up a trust department. They wanted us to help them set it up. And then after dinner, we looked at each other and said, we could have our own firm. So that's how we did our own firm in 1997.
And when you guys started your own firm, what was that process like? Did you guys already had clients already?
You know what happened? My partner had gone out before me, and he had gone out before me and started the firm with someone else who we had worked with. And he thought more people would follow him, and he thought not to be audited by the state, you had to have over $100 million under management. And it turned out they didn't. And I had walked away, and I had people calling me when I was at the private thing. So I said, I probably have $100 million sitting out there if we just do it. And so that's when we joined and we became partners. And then I had a lot of clients that I've had before. And I mean, we've had clients, even my partner, I've had clients since 1987, 1982 that I still have as clients. I mean, one of my big clients, you would know, is Florida Education Fund. And they're a wonderful organization.
Florida Education Fund?
They award like 85% of all the African-American PhDs in the state of Florida. And it was set up on a grant from the state and the McKnight Foundation from 3M. And I've been managing their money since 1987. Okay. And when you hear the McKnight Scholars in school, they're the ones that
That funds it.
that funds that. And it's a great organization. And but so I have stuff for them, and they have other managers at this point. But
So
it's
how,
those kinds of accounts, and relationships. I mean, because what happened with them, quite honestly, there was something called the Barnett Aiden Art Collection, which was all African American artists, and it was a collection where they had paintings that went back into the turn of the century. And a lot of the artists back then were from Louisiana, but since they weren't permitted to go to art school, if you were African American in the States, they would go to Paris, and they became artists. So they had a lot of that in the collection. And what happened when I was at Manufacturers Hanover, they had a painting in their Harlem branch. And what happened, they foreclosed on it, because the guy owed them money. So I got them to donate it to the art collection. So we donated that. And what had happened, even to buy the art collection at the time, interest rates were going up, and they wanted to buy it. And I said to them, here's my Manny Hanny hat, and the bank will give you a loan at like 9.5 at the time, I think. I said, but here's my Judy Neiwirth hat. You don't want to do that. I said, here's what we're going to do. I said, you have a reverse repo where it resets every month on the interest rate. We'll borrow against that, because they needed a couple $1 million to buy the collection. I said, and then I think the rates will go down. And I was right. Eventually, when we paid it off, the rates went from 9.5 down to 5.5, where if they would have done it in the bank, they would have had a level thing. So we were always friendly, shall we say. Then when I went out on my own, they were having issues about health insurance. And so I didn't charge them a fee for a year or two. I mean, we were just friends, We've been friends forever. So anyhow, but they're a wonderful organization. They have such a positive impact on people's lives. And they do that because they want people to be role models, like in the academic field and things like that. So, that's what I have. So I've those kinds of things I have going on, and we're very boring investors. I know everybody's going in, going out. We're not day traders. We buy boring things. You buy real stocks that pay dividends. You buy investment grade bonds and investment grade preferred stocks, and certainly, if the market goes down 20%, your good stocks will go down 20%. But you know what? Home Depot will be here tomorrow, and Johnson
so is that
and
your
Johnson.
strategy? What is your strategy of managing
Well, everybody has different things, but I mean, our thing is to try to have positive return and be in real things. I mean, if I go back, I have people now that probably their tax cost in Apple is $3 a share because we've had it since it came out, or same thing with Home Depot. I mean, I have accounts that are 40 years old at this point, things like that. But
how do you pick the certain companies?
you know what? I think part of it is you've got to see if the world changes sometimes. When we started buying like Apple and Google and those things, and you weren't sure, so you bought a little bit of it. But you see what's happened with the internet, and like General Electric has gone the other way. I mean, and the problem is, it was a good company, and I forget the guy's name, but he really ran it in the ground. They had a terrible CFO. I can't remember his name, but he was an idiot. I mean, he'd be flying private, and then he'd have another plane flying behind him in case his plane, just total waste and narcissistic craziness.
So you're actually doing research on the whole company before you make a decision.
We do some. I mean, we have certain brokers we've done business with for years, and if they give us something, we'll look at it a little more closely. Of course, we read a lot of things ourselves. I do more of the fixed income, which is more on credit and duration kind of things, and the world changes. I mean, you can do all your homework in the world, and at the end of the day, it won't matter. I mean, you had 9/11. I had there was a company when I first started called Arrow Electronics. I think it was traded, I want to say like $40 a share, maybe 50. And they were a really good company, and they had a board, finance meeting, whatever. It was at the Rye Hilton in New York. And there was a fire, and all the people got killed that afternoon in the fire. So the next day, the stock opened, boom, and until stuff happened. But there's things
you can't predict that.
There's just stuff that, when you wake up in the morning, look at what's going on. If we wake up and we're at war with China tomorrow, you're going to be at war with China. All of a sudden, your supply chain is going to be very crazy, and it's going to be very detrimental for everybody. And the problem is, I think on both sides, you got these idiots. I feel like when I was a kid, there was a nursery rhyme show or whatever it's called, Romper Room. That's what I feel like, tit for tat, and nobody with the real end game is you know what, you both need each other, so figure it out. Okay.
So is there any preparing that you could do to prevent?
Well, you do, but you're diversified, but you don't have super concentrations. Because the best
explain that what that for people like myself that don't understand what that means.
You look at your portfolio, maybe you have 2% or 3% of your assets in that stock or that bond. You don't have 25% of it in, like everybody says, oh, Google's great, this is great. And you know what, it is great. And the people who did the Bitcoin stuff, they made a lot of money. I'm not a big fan of Bitcoin at all, and though I think it might be here. It reminds me of something called tulip mania. And tulip mania goes all the way back to the 1600s, 1700s in the Netherlands, where they bid up the price of tulips crazy. They were gold. Tulips, everything tulips. And people were buying tulips and trading tulips and everything. And then in the end, it was the balloon, and it collapsed. Okay? So then what happened is that I call that the first big bubble, and there's you can just punch it up, tulip mania. It's kind of interesting. And the thing with Bitcoin and all the cryptocurrencies that concern me is I don't think the governments are ready to let them have a place unless they have control, because the whole idea of Bitcoin that's so frightening to all governments is that you can use it for drug money. You can use it for terrorists, and they can't keep track of where the cash is to finance things. And I think that's one of your biggest problems. That's not to say if you bought it, you could have made $1 gazillion, okay? It's just not my thing. Right. If I'm going to gamble, I'll buy a lotto ticket, okay?
Right. So what advice would you give the family that want to start investing? Where do they start?
You know what, they start, if they want, and you don't have a lot of money, you go out and you don't buy mutual funds. Mutual funds have a lot of internal fees. You buy an exchange-traded fund, like a Vanguard S&P 500 fund. I think they charge $35 a month or whatever it is. Maybe a year to buy it. I don't know. The thing is, though, the S&P 500 will be reflective of all the stocks in the Standard & Poor's Index, which 500 stocks that are involved in everything. And what would happen is, if it's doing well, your money goes up. If it's doing poorly, your money's going down. But if you're just starting, so that's something, I don't know, maybe you start and you put $100 in 1 month, and then 2 months later you can put another $100. So you can just dollar cost, you put in $50, whatever. And that's what I would do if I was just starting and I didn't know anything. I'd look at something like that.
So if a family want to grow and develop financial freedom,
yeah,
or structure their family in a capacity where they can manage money, what should they do to first learn how to, I guess first, let me start off. I think the process is learning how to manage your money.
First of all, see if they manage their everyday money. Make sure, see if their bills are paid.
How is that? How could they manage their everyday money, first of all?
You know how much money you're getting. You know what you need to spend the money on. Then the extra is what do you want to spend the money on extra. So you've got to say, here, my food is so much, my kids' shoes are so much, the this, the that, my dog food is so much, whatever it is, and you take care of
Cost of living.
your cost of living first. And then the thing is, then you have the extras. Then the extra disposable income is either you're going to invest some money or you say, you know what? I have this car I really like, but I want to buy a much more expensive car that's going to cost me $300 or more a month. I mean, those are personal decisions, you know. I never thought cars were that important, but there are people that, I mean, they define themselves for it. And
after they learn how to manage their everyday cost of living.
But this is stuff that they can, I mean, there's so much information now because it's nonstop talking heads on TV, with the finance. Because what I do, I watch all the stations. I watch Bloomberg for like an hour or two. I watch Fox News for an hour or two. I watch MSNBC. I watch Squawk Box. And the nice thing about them is whenever there's an event, everybody, you would have thought it was a different event. They all have a different spin. And the problem I find with the news these days is they're all pundits. They want to give me their opinion. And it's like, I don't need your opinion, or especially if you listen to a speech, like if anybody gives a speech, they say, he said, blah, blah. And I look at my husband and I say, did we fail English? Did we not understand what he just said, that I have to have some 30-year-old kid tell me what he said? And they're all, and I think that's half the problem with the whole government and our system is that, I mean, even though my father went to Harvard and everything, I'll never forget. Somebody came for a job interview from Harvard, and my mom said, "Did you hire him?" And she said, "Of course not." He said, "I never hire anybody that went to Harvard." He said, "They only teach people to be the boss." He says, and they all have the same mindset. And I didn't know what he meant, but if you look at even the problem with the Supreme Court and all this, that's why I everybody's mad about everything, but. And even like the people on TV, they all went to the same schools. They all had the same teachers. They all think they're the smartest people in the world, and this
so that mindset is basically
they're smarter. I mean, I grew up in the Northeast, and my parents taught me, you're lucky. We're your parents, but and whatever. But that's why if I were to do the Supreme Court, my thing would be, you can have one judge from Harvard, you can have one judge from the University of Michigan, you could have one. I don't care if he's from the University of New Mexico.
Different thought pattern,
different view, and that's and all the senators and all these guys, even though they make like they don't like each other, they've all been there 40 years. 50 years, McConnell, Schumer, Pelosi. And the thing is, we don't have an immigration policy because they didn't bother to have an immigration policy. They've been there enough years to make an immigration policy. We don't have a balanced budget because they go out and spend more money than we have. And they don't, they're all so stupid because we're not going to be able to pay this all back. I mean, they're turning our country into a real third world country now.
So you as a financing manager, that you got to cringe when you watch how America's spending money in a certain capacity.
Well, I cringe and I feel sorry for people at the border, but I was telling you, I went to school in Austria. I think they used to try to help people escape because what happened from Hungary, they would come from Hungary, and they had machine gun towers and everything. In fact, my mother got crazy because when I used to travel, I'd have my picture taken with somebody when we went to communist country with their machine guns. So I called it my machine gun collection when I went to Czechoslovakia, when I went to Hungary. And my mother was like, "What is?" I said, "Well, we went on vacation, and I had them take my picture with them." So.
My goodness,
it was
the cringing.
Crazy. No, it was fun. It was fun. I mean, look, they didn't want to do it either. I mean, these were people. That's how they grew up. I mean, you have a 20-year-old kid. What does he have to do with if they're being communist? But what I was going to say here is that you can't we can't finance the whole world, and by them letting in, I don't have anything against illegal immigrants. I'm all for everybody being able to come here, but legally, because we can't afford it. And what did they've let in like 3 million people since Biden's president? You don't know where they are. They said that in New York now they're having a polio epidemic again, and polio was totally eradicated when I was a kid. Took like 5 years for the vaccine, but and they didn't close the country down, and people died. People died, people got polio, but people went to school. And I mean, the whole idea of closing everything down was absurd. So, and then they're sitting here talking about if they're going to lift the mandate for people to come into the country with masks or not being vaccinated when you've let 3 million people here who don't have any vaccinations whatsoever. So, I mean, it's just absurd. I mean, and it's like nobody's home. It's like nobody's taking calls. Everything is political about getting reelected. So, I mean, I'm not in charge, but I would have 1 6-year term of president where you never could run again. And that way well, not only that, you wouldn't spend the whole time doing fundraisers to run again. And even
the moment they're done, they got to raise more funds.
And even the congressmen, like the Congress people, I wouldn't have 2-year terms. I'd have like 2 4-year terms. Same thing. You can never run again. Senators, maybe 2 6-year terms. You can never run again.
So what would be your main reason for doing that? Is it just to have new mindset, new thinking, new?
Well, look what's happened. I mean, I want you to tell me how much somebody was worth the day they got elected, what they're worth when they get out, and they've never had a job that paid more than like maybe $150,000, $200,000 a year. Okay, Biden's been in office, 45 years, and he's got, 3 houses, and he's worth...
Yeah, how does all this happen?
Harry Reid was worth like $30 million when he retired, and he never had a job except in the government.
Wow.
I mean,
so that,
they just abused the power.
I think I want to go into also, when it comes to educating families about funding and learning how to manage their finances, how important is credit?
Credit's important, and the thing that I think it's the way they do it is very poor. I mean, you can have, I've been fighting with somebody, and they probably screwed up my credit score, but it didn't matter. But I had changed from T-Mobile to AT&T for my telephone, and I paid them, and I was done. And then I get a bill that I owe them for 2 months after I had moved the phone, that I owed them a couple $100. And I said, I don't. Send me a bill. So they didn't. But then I got a letter from the credit from someone trying to collect it. And I said, I'm waiting for the bill. Show me what I owe you money for, because I had moved the phone and I don't owe you. So then I got something where they show the bill, T-Mobile, with the amount. I said, I want you to show me what it is, how you add up. And to show you how ridiculous this is, I'm fighting with them over like $450. Okay, but I won't pay them.
Until I know what the bill is.
Well, I'll give you an example. I recently moved up here from Miami. I lived in Miami 35 years. And I had put a bid on a house because I'm living here 3 years. And I was done, and this was going back, and I was within a couple of $1,000s of purchasing the house, and then my realtor came back to me and said, "Well, they won't do it unless we each kick in like $2,500, meaning my realtor and the other one, so that we can get it done." And I looked at him. I said, "We're not going to get it done." He said, "What do you mean?" I said, "I'm not going to buy the house now." And he says, "What do you mean?" I said, "Because they're trying to chisel you, and you people are working, and I don't need to do business with them." I said, "We'll find another house." And I never bought the house, and I bought another house. So it's just the way I am. You do business, you're honest, you don't take advantage of people, and I can't stand people
who take advantage of people.
But not only that, who've had every advantage, and it's really not them. I hate to say it, 90% of the time, the people who have worked, like you and me, Beethoven, and people that I know are very sick, they're not like that. Unfortunately, it's a lot of time the people who inherited it, who never had to do stuff and have this mindset that I'm better. We were never better. I mean, even my mother had a housekeeper, came in a couple of times a week. We always had to make our bed. It was like it didn't matter. She's here to help me. But you're responsible for these things every day, and that was the end of it.
Like, what do you think that kept the business running for so long? What's your secret of keeping your business running for so long?
You know what? We never changed anything. I mean, we were bankers, and we haven't changed our outlook on what the way to invest money. You need good quality companies. You need things that are investment grade. You need this. And then you really have to see what the underlying needs of the client are, because you have clients that are younger and they're making money, but by the time you get people, I have people now that are older that were making money but they're retired, and so they've gone from earning money to living off their income. So it's just depending what they need, and being conservative about it and telling them the truth. You can't spend money on this. If you want to, you're going to have to take it out of here and whatever.
So next for you after the firm, is it selling the firm? Is it like, what do you believe you would want to do?
I don't know that I'll do anything. I'll probably work forever. It's not that hard. I like it. It keeps your mind young, and or maybe cut back. Whatever. I'll talk.
But what does cut back look like for you?
I don't know. I've played golf since I was in my 20s. Since I'm 21, I'm a really good golfer. But my husband doesn't play at all. I can't believe I married someone who doesn't play golf. What could you do once in a while? But it's hot, and it's I don't know. I think if you go to work, or if you do charity stuff, you have to be engaged with people. That's the thing, to be engaged with people, to have a reason to get up in the morning. Because a lot of times when people retire, they have nowhere to go, and a lot of them are isolated because, say, their children moved away or their spouse dies, and then all of a sudden they're alone and they have no purpose. Like I have pets, I have dogs I'm always running around with, but I think that's the thing. You've got to do something. I'm a big believer. You get up in the morning and you do something, and I don't know if you work at night, so the believer is you get up at night and you work at night. But these people that get up at 10, 11, 12 o'clock, and by then my day is half over. Like today, when I'm done here, my day's half over already.
What do you believe, kind of wrap things up, what do you believe your secret to success is?
I was very lucky. I had the advantage. I really did have the advantage of the ability to have a really good education. And I actually went to public school, but the public schools were really good. When I grew up, New Rochelle was a great school. You could take 14 languages, okay? And where I grew up, a lot of people's parents worked in the UN. A lot of people's parents were in Broadway and the soap operas. I remember my brother had a friend, Mrs. Edley, and she was sweet as could be, African-American, and her husband was one of the lawyers for the Ford Foundation. And in fact, my brother's friend ended up, I think he taught law at Harvard in the end. And what happened is that, like we were kids, you'd go all over the place. But she was, whatever soap she was on, we'd come home from school and we'd flop down and watch the half hour, and she was always the bad person. So, if she had to babysit us because all the other parents went out and you're over to her house and she's baking cookies, you'd say, "Are they going to kill you this week? Are you going to have an affair again?" And you would be like, a little.
You already know the scene.
But the thing is, they were just people, and they would laugh. They were friends of your parents. It wasn't this like everything. Everybody is so into themselves, and
times are different.
Yeah, and nobody. And the difference is, I think the family had a lot to do with it, and things are very different now. When I didn't know anybody whose parents had actually gotten divorced until I was a junior in high school. I remember coming home and saying to my mom, "Oh, so-and-so, his parents are getting divorced." And no one had children out of wedlock. It was like.
What do you think changed? What do you think the biggest change happened?
I think that the breakdown of family a little bit, but I think a lot of it acceptance that everything was okay, and it's okay, but I think it puts a real strain on the person. I think people are better with a little structure, better where they have more support, from families and friends and things, where, how many people are just out there now? And I found it, I was in Santa Barbara last year because I had a reunion for my friends from Vienna. There's 30 of us that are still friendly. We get together every 5 years for a reunion. So we had our 9th reunion from just going to school in Vienna, and they all live all over the country. In fact, I heard from my friend from Oklahoma yesterday, who I've been friends with since 1975.
Beautiful thing.
Yeah. And he was telling me that his grass was all brown, and he wanted to get a paint can because he said there's no water, and he's given up. He's given up. But I think a lot of it is structure. if you're fortunate enough to have good role models in your family, it doesn't necessarily have to be your parents, but I was lucky like that, I also was lucky. I'm happily married. I met my husband on a blind date. I almost didn't go out with him. I remember I had a friend who had gone to his brother's wedding. And then I should tell you, the end of it is my mother knew everything about him before I did. I didn't realize till after I got married. But what happened, my mother played cards with my friend's mother, who was friendly with Arthur. So she probably knew everything about my husband before I did. But anyhow, he calls me up to go out. And he wants to go for pizza. They used to have a deep dish pizza place on Cypress Creek called Uno's Pizza, which was Chicago pizza.
Yeah, I'm familiar with Uno's Pizza.
And I never forget, I put my hand over the phone. I said to my mom, "Can you believe this guy wants to check me out over a pizza?" And she said to me, "Well, you don't have anything to do. You might as well go." What can I tell you? We would have gotten married in 3 months, but we had to wait 6 months because his sister's children weren't out of school until Washington birthday weekend. I got married because they were 12 and 14 at the time. I had to wait for a winter session.
Wow.
And I'm married 38 years. And then the only other problem is I became the in-law. He became the child within 2 months. I mean, he was like that. He was very close to my mother. And it was very nice. So, yeah, but I think it's those kinds of things. I think your personal life, and I'm lucky. I mean, it's difficult to have a lot of things. And I never, I didn't have any health issues. I mean, I have my MS. I give myself a shot, but I was lucky in what I had. I mean, there's progressive where you get worse. There's chronic where and I just had what's called remitting relapsing. Something happened, it reversed out, and I was fine. A lot of it is, in Jewish, there's a word besher. It means fated. It's, I was lucky on a lot of levels for things that I had nothing to really do with.
But now, once you understood your luck, you then kept it consistent and kept it going.
I always knew I was lucky. I never lost track of the fact that it could have been something else. And my grandmother, she was very comfortable. She was one.
Let you know that you're lucky.
Let's put it this way. When I was a kid, and if the gardener came, or when I was little, you used to have the same sanitation people would come, and when we were little, everybody was Mr. or Mrs. to us. They weren't like calling them by their first name because they were the gardener, or they were
the respect level,
or if they went in the bakery. I mean, I remember all my mother's friends. I mean, even until I got married, you called them Mr. and Mrs. I remember one of them said, "You can call me by my first name." And I said, "I don't think I ever could think of you by your first name. I've known you since I'm 12 and I'm 30 now, and I still
don't make a difference." Yeah. But I think I want to thank you for stopping by, to really having this conversation and being open, because money management cannot be, I don't think it's an easy thing. And for you to manage the level of people and clients that you service is impressive. Anything else you want to add to it before we go?
Whatever, you learn. And as far as anything to do with the finance, there's so much stuff on the internet. You could just punch up understanding a stock, understanding a bond. You know what I mean? The
information is there if you want it.
Now it's whatever. I mean, it's not like when I was little and you had to go look it up in the encyclopedia. Or I remember my parents would use big words and they'd say, "Look it up." I remember area died. I said, "I can't find it under the A's." And they started laughing at me. They said, "All right, we'll give you a hint."
Let me spell it the right way first.
Yeah, but I mean, my husband's he's a lawyer. He had been a judge when he was younger, in his 30s, in New Jersey. And what happened, he had something really cute because of word check, whatever. And he was doing a bankruptcy, and they had put in where it was supposed to say creditor, the word predator, but with the spell check, it was a correct word. So I remember he said, when he was in court one day, he said, "I have to apologize to everybody because everywhere in this brief that's supposed to say creditor, it does say predator." Okay. And so.
Way to go, spell check.
But you got to be careful. See, people believe stuff and they don't check stuff. And I think, if anything, that's the biggest crime, is these kids that get garbage on the internet and they think it's true. And like,
It's so manipulative. I think the internet is so powerful. It gives out
and
a lot of
it's what they
information.
and unfortunately the people at Google and Facebook and all these people, they disseminate what they want you to see, and that's also a big problem now. I mean, I think I shudder to think if Biden and Trump could run again. I said that would be like, I'd feel like I'm living in that, what was that movie, Groundhog's Day? Where it's happening again.
Yeah.
And that's why I think you need forced retirement.
Yeah, absolutely.
I know. I mean, there's got to be somebody in this country in their
Well, I think
40s.
you're going to be perfect to run for office, so get ready for your campaign. Never. Well,
Never.
well, Judy, thank you again for stopping by and having this conversation. We're going to try to keep some more conversation going.
Anytime.
One thing I know about you, you're always going to be there for me. So thank you very much.
You know that Beethoven.
I do. Thank you very much. God bless. Good night.
Good night.